Hi, this is Stuart Nachbar with Educated Quest. Today I am with Sohvi Reikkinen. She handles international admissions for Northumbria University in Newcastle in the UK. I previously spoke with Thomas Day at Newcastle University. Thomas introduced me to Sophie, who has been anxious to talk with me about Northumbria. Um, I've already told Sophie I liken Newcastle to the University of Michigan. I liken Northumbria to Northeastern University, which is a newer, but there's an emphasis on work and experiential learning. But there's an increasing emphasis on the academics, on the research component of the school. So you've got a cross between, say, a Northeastern and a University of Pennsylvania, Boston University. There's a growing optimism about Northumbria that Sohvi wanted to share with me. Um, in 2022, just after the great pandemic, Northumbria was voted University of the Year by Times Higher Education. Times Higher Education, for those who love rankings, ranks universities all around the world. So Americans who are listening to this will see American universities ranked with universities in the UK and other countries. Northumbria is a bit more international than many American universities. It has about a third of its student body from other countries. American universities, if they have anywhere between 15 and 20%, that's a lot. And Salvi herself went to college in Newcastle. She came from Finland. So we're going to talk a little bit about what it was like to be a student there. And we're going to talk about what it was like, what it's like for a student who's there now. What has made this school what it is? And can you tell me a bit about Northumbria and how it's gotten the recognition it has, how it's been named the University of the Year against other universities around the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me, Stuart. It's an honor to be here and have a chat about all things Northumbria, which of course I'm always happy to do. Um, yeah, obviously we were very, very honored and very excited when we got the award at the end of last year. It was November 20, no, not last year. November 22 is when they kind of announced the big reveal that Northumbria had won the honor of University of the Year for 2022. What we kind of talk about with Times Higher Ed is kind of like the Oscars of the ranking world. You know, it's kind of the big ta-da when you get that one. So we were very very excited about it.
Do you get a statue?
Um, I wish. I'm sure there's some kind of, like fancy glass something somewhere in the vice chancellor's office that says we won that honor as well. I haven't seen it. Do you know what? I lie. I have seen it with my own eyes. I actually didn't touch it because there was quite a queue for people to get a photo with it, but they did kind of parade it around the university when we first won that award as well. Um, but kind of, yeah, obviously, students, we kind of try to make sure that students are aware that rankings are only one part of the bigger picture around when looking at universities, but they can be a really helpful guide to kind of point you in the right direction about what you're looking for in a university and which ones are the ones to keep on your radar. And with Times Higher Education, what they kind of saw in Northumbria that granted us this award was um, the fact that we have kind of risen really highly in the research rankings in the UK recently. Um, I think we went up something like 20, 30 places, but don't quote me on that. You can find all the information on the nitty gritty of it on our website. But, we kind of really jumped places in terms of the amount of research that we're doing as an institution and how much it's being recognized globally and kind of being cited in academic pieces and things like that. And then obviously how that then leads into the student experience is that you're kind of learning from experts in the field. Our academics are being recognized for the work that they're doing outside of the classroom, that they are then bringing that knowledge to our students and ensuring that what they're teaching our students is kind of at the front line of what's going on in the world, not just kind of talking about things that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago, but really making sure that the information that we're teaching our students is fresh as well. The other thing that we kind of got recognized for in that award was the kind of what's called widening participation in the UK. So focusing on ensuring that students from various economic and socioeconomic backgrounds are getting the opportunity to come to university. You know, they might be the first in their family to come to university and that kind of thing, and making sure that that opportunity is there, not just kind of within the local region, but across the UK and globally as well. And then the third piece around that is kind of recognizing the effort we've put into making sure that our students, when they graduate, are then as employable as possible, getting the opportunities to find employment and, kind of use that degree to the benefit of themselves, but also local, national, and international society as a whole as well. So that was kind of what made up that package and gave us the win at the end of 2022.
Now, students who come to Northumbria from outside the UK, can they get work placements through the academic programs that they chose?
Yeah, most of our programs, so not every single program has the opportunity to do a placement. Some of them kind of are a bit more restricted, maybe because of accreditation or something like that. But pretty much all of our programs have the opportunity for students to either do a placement that's kind of built into the program itself, or then kind of take a year out or a half year out or whatever to kind of do a little bit of either study abroad or a kind of what we call placement. So that's kind of like an internship type of thing where you, find a job at a company or kind of doing a role that's hopefully relevant to what you're studying and getting that kind of job experience in that field, kind of as part of your degree.
And are the work placements in Newcastle or are they in other parts of the country?
They can be anywhere. So obviously we have a lot of really strong connections with companies that are based in Newcastle and in the northeast of England. So that's normally kind of where the majority of the opportunities are. But we do have students go kind of all over the world. You know, there's nothing stopping a student if they have a really good kind of connection with like a company or something where they want to do their placement and it's even overseas outside of the UK. Obviously, there might be like visa restrictions and things like that, but those notwithstanding, students are welcome to do their placements anywhere as long as it's kind of approved by their academic tutor to make sure that it fits in with what the aim is, which is obviously to get work experience that's relevant to their future field.
Now, given Northumbria is very proud of its achievements with Times Higher Education, my sense is you're marketing to a global audience, probably like you and I are having this conversation. For people from other countries who did not grow up in the UK, what are there specific academic programs that have been a major draw?
At Northumbria, as in what we
Yes,
offer.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it varies country to country. You know, some countries we get a lot of interest for example, our physiotherapy program, midwifery and nursing, which actually in the UK it is unusual for like not all medical or medicine related programs are always available or open to international students as well, but ours are. So that's a really big draw for anybody wanting to kind of get into nursing or midwifery. Um, we have a really strong design school, so things like fashion, 3D design, design for industry, that kind of thing. I've seen a lot of applications from international or kind of overseas countries increase as well. There's a really strong architecture program. US students specifically, we see a lot of interest in our sports and physiotherapy and kind of sports and exercise sciences. So things like sports management, coaching, that kind of thing as well.
That's become more and more popular here
Yeah.
as well, especially since college sports have grown more popular. Um, the instruction students get there, is it very similar to what they might get here? Mainly about more about health and kinesiology than say how to market a football team.
I think it depends on the program they go for. In the UK, I don't know how well versed the audience might be in how programs are structured, but normally you apply for quite a specific major when you're applying for programs in the UK. So you would be applying for example, physiotherapy as a singular topic, and then you would be really focusing on the physiotherapy side of things. So, kind of rehabilitation and that kind of thing. Versus then if you wanted to manage a football team, then you would be applying for sports management as a specific area, and then of course you would just be solely focusing on that. There's of course options, usually within UK degrees, where you can do a few optional modules that might come kind of cross the borders a little bit, but usually it's still within that kind of same vague area. So if you were studying sports management, but then you wanted to do one or two modules in a more kind of physiotherapy related subject, that might be possible, but you wouldn't be able to kind of do sports management and then do a couple of courses here and there in art or sociology or something. It's usually kind of all tied into that specific academic area that you're really focusing on and getting that expertise in.
See, this is interesting. You have two areas that you've mentioned already, physiotherapy and architecture, that typically require in America require an advanced degree to be a licensed professional.
Mm-hmm.
In architecture, typically takes 5 or 6 years to earn that. Physical therapy, it depends. Some states in the United States, it has to be a DPT, a
Mm-hmm.
doctor of physical therapy. Others will, I think, still accept a master's. Are those programs somewhat accelerated? Would students save a year by doing them at
Yeah,
Northumbria?
most of the time, yes, they would be saving a year. So our physiotherapy program is 3 years as an undergraduate degree. We also do an accelerated 2-year master's program if they've never done physiotherapy and it's kind of a field they want to go into. Then there is that kind of 2-year master's version of it as well, which then allows them to practice. Obviously, what they would need to double check is make sure that if they're working overseas, outside of the UK, then just make sure that that qualification actually translates. So they might need to do, like a little bit of a conversion or some kind of course to just ensure that the knowledge translates into whatever country they're wanting to work in. With architecture, our undergraduate degree is 3 years. And then normally what students would we do then have a kind of architecture masters as well that they would then need to do to, kind of be able to fully work as an architect. So that would be three plus then the one. But in between, they normally are expected to have gained some kind of work experience as
Hmm.
well. So it does kind of, I think if you were saying architecture 5 to 6 years, I think partly it is around the 5, maybe 6 year mark in the UK as well. So it's not as kind of accelerated as some other areas.
So, in other words, if you intend to go home after you finish, you better check to be sure you could do the
Yeah.
work you hope to
Yeah,
do.
definitely. In case you end up getting home and then it turns out you have to do another 2 years of something anyway, and you think, oh, well, what was the point?
But this is again now. Some of these degrees take less time. If someone was a high school senior right now in the United States, where they go to high school typically for 4 years, there isn't a grade 13 like there is in some other countries. How should a high school senior prepare, assuming they know what they want to study, because that's
Hmm.
also another factor? How should they prepare to come into a university like Northumbria while they're still in high school?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a lot that students can do, and I think, as you've alluded to there, the most important thing is to really understand what is it that you want to study at university, because as I've mentioned, when you apply to study in the UK, you do apply for a very specific major. So I think that's really the most important thing for any US high school student is to think about, like, what is it that I want to really be not just studying but kind of then doing post degree as well. What is the kind of, even if it's not a specific career you've got in mind, like a dentist or whatever, but having that kind of general idea of what field you want to be working in after you graduate is really, really important, because the degrees are very academically focused on just that one area. And if you kind of get into it and start to realize this isn't my cup of tea, there is flexibility. Students can kind of transfer programs and things, but it's a lot more restricted than it is in the US as well. So you kind of can't go in undeclared and then, kind of make your mind up over a couple of years. You have to kind of be in that specific degree from the very beginning. So I think that's really important for students to really just understand how the UK system works, and do their research and really look into the different degree programs, because architecture at Northumbria versus architecture at Newcastle University versus architecture at another university can look very different as well. It's not always the same um, degree structure. It's not the same degree content. You know, universities might have, like at Northumbria, we have a lot more kind of like a practical focus on the style of teaching and also the content we cover. Versus you might have other institutions where it's a lot more academically focused and it's a bit more theory heavy. So again, it just depends on your kind of personal preference and really finding that perfect match, which is where obviously universities are very happy to talk to students and really try to kind of clarify their style and how that might match with the individual student as well. Um, but the other things to kind of prepare and make sure that you kind of have got in hand is also if there's any subject specific requirements. So, for example, if you're wanting to apply to study biology, you normally have to have at least a certain kind of amount of biology related credits in your high school experience as well. So, again, that's good to double check with each university that you might be looking at and just make sure that you actually meet those kind of more specific requirements as well. So, it's not just about having certain grades. It can also be about, you know, kind of those subjects that you've studied as well. So it's good to just double check. And again, each university will have different ways of assessing applicants as well. So some universities might have really specific requirements that they have for each subject you've taken versus other universities that are a bit more open and a little bit more flexible with their requirements. So it's a lot of research, which is obviously where, you know, going to um, counselors and kind of getting that kind of extra support can be really helpful as well, who understand the UK system a bit better and, you know, kind of can help navigate these different ways of universities working in the UK.
Would you say you that Northumbria and maybe its neighbor, Newcastle, that they're somewhat transparent about the rigor that's
Mm-hmm.
required to be in the program?
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting because you apply, let's say, to a very selective university in the United States, and yes, they might say, well, an engineer should have the hardest math and have physics and chemistry. But then there are some schools that say, oh, pre-calculus is fine. We'll teach you calculus.
Mm-hmm.
And but sometimes schools are not always that specific. Um, does being specific help us, an applicant, to sort of self-select which schools will be the best fit for them, which programs will be the best fit for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think obviously we don't kind of leave the ball fully in their court. You know, we're not expecting students to kind of figure it out and just kind of hope that they have applied for universities that will accept them. Of course, we're happy to have that conversation, especially sometimes with students who might feel like they're just on the borderline where, you know, they look at our university website and they see certain requirements and think, ooh, I'm not quite there, but I might be, you know, reach out and we'll have a chat and we can have a look at, you know, the bigger picture. And there can be flexibility in terms of if a student might not have incredible grades academically, but they've got, you know, some like really relevant work experience, they've got a clear passion for the subject, that can make a really big difference as well. But I think the UK system as a whole, it is quite nice because it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. You know, things are on the website quite clearly saying this is kind of the minimum grade requirement. You know, this is what we need in terms of any extra essays or whatever. It's all on there and it's quite easy to find. So hopefully that takes the stress out of it at least a little bit.
The UCAS asks for a personal statement from the student.
Mm-hmm.
What do you look to see when you're reading the personal statements?
I think again it can be really subject specific. So with some personal statements, um, if it's a very competitive program, that's where the personal statement can make a really big difference. So, for example, physiotherapy, midwifery, these medical programs where we get a lot of applications and we're very limited in places because of kind of government funding and support. That's where the personal statement can make a really big difference for admissions because you might get 50 applicants who all have the same kind of meet the minimum grade requirement, and so then it's a question of how do you differentiate them and how do you kind of tell people apart. And the personal statement is usually the kind of number one tool for that. So it's then about reading the personal statement to really understand that the student knows what subject they've applied for. I mean, you think that's quite a plain statement to make, but sometimes, you read a personal statement and you think, I don't think this person has applied for the right subject. They're talking about this,
Mhm.
and this, but that's not what this degree actually teaches. And so that can be a really kind of helpful tool for admissions, because then we can go back to the student and say, do you know what? I think you'd be more suited for this program instead, and give them the opportunity to kind of rethink that choice, for example. Um, and other subjects where there's maybe less competition, again with the UK, the kind of system, it works quite kind of plainly and kind of clearly, that if you've got the academic requirements, and there's spaces on the program, and you've got a personal statement that kind of supports the fact that you are looking for that subject, you have an interest in it, then that's usually enough for admissions to think, okay, yeah, we'll give this person an offer. Obviously, it's not guaranteed, and there can be other factors involved, but that's where the personal statement can be kind of a helpful tool, is when the competition is a lot higher.
This is interesting. In the United States, and it's been more common this year than it's been in other years, you get students who get decisions from U.S. universities. Sohvi, you have been admitted to engineering at school A, and your heart was in engineering. School B says you've been admitted to data science, but not engineering. School C says you're admitted to pre-engineering, and your grades in pre-engineering are going to determine whether you're an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it sounds like when you're admitted to a program, you admit to the program you picked, and you picked it for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And do you ever do you read these and say, okay, Stuart, you're not quite the person for architecture, but you might be, but given what we saw in your transcript and what we saw in the personal statement, you might be a fit for this other program. Do you ever volunteer that information, or does the student basically move on and look at another school?
I think it depends on the institution. Universities do things differently. So some might just look at an application and go, this person's not suited for the program they've applied for. We're just going to reject them. And other institutions, like at Northumbria, will look at them and go, okay, well, they've applied for engineering, but their grades are just kind of not really high enough. So instead of just rejecting them, we'll give them an offer for a foundation degree, for example. So, kind of, I guess, what pre engineering is what you were speaking about, a kind of like slightly lower level where they get that extra year to then kind of catch up academically and get to that level that we would require. Or then alternatively, we have, for our programs that are really popular, like, I know I keep talking about physiotherapy, but it's a really good example for this one. Again, where, you get a lot of applications for not a lot of places. And, if we get an application from someone and they seem academically very capable, maybe not quite, there with the clarity of the vibe we get from them, that physiotherapy is the right program for them, we would then potentially kind of give them an alternate offer for maybe like sports management or nutrition or whatever it is that we kind of think would possibly be a better fit academically for them. So it does happen, yeah.
Now, you told me before we signed on that Newcastle and Northumbria are essentially neighbors, and you've lived in Newcastle for a long time. What is the perception of each school in a community, in the community? Do they say, "Oh, that's the school for or of," versus what the other school
Sorry,
is?
Stuart, my internet cut out there a little bit. I didn't catch the question. Do you mind
Fair enough.
repeating it?
Sure. What are the perceptions of your Northumbria and Newcastle are neighbors, practically neighbors. What are the perceptions in the neighborhood about each school, if there are
I
any?
see. Um, I mean, I suppose, because so I came to Newcastle originally as a Newcastle University student. That's kind of the university that I studied at, and then since graduating, then came to work at Northumbria. And as staff, we have a very friendly kind of relationship. But as a student, I think you probably get this competition kind of in every city where there's more than one university, where whichever university you go to, you think you're at the better university. um, but I think that's just a little bit of friendly competition as kind of the two institutions go. We do have a really good relationship with Newcastle University because we are quite distinct institutions at the end of the day. Newcastle University is more the kind of like historic, what's called a red brick UK university. They've been kind of focusing on quite different subjects to what we offer as well in terms of their kind of big draw majors. Um, their style of teaching is slightly different because it's that kind of more traditional academically focused style of teaching. And so I think kind of we fit quite nicely. It kind of seems quite silly to think, as I was explaining to Stuart before the recording started, that you've got the kind of main high street shopping kind of area in the center of the city, and then literally 3 minutes to the east you've got Newcastle University, 3 minutes to the west you've got Northumbria University. So we're both kind of just across the street from each other. You can practically wave to the other university from the highest floors of our buildings. But it works quite nicely because we are very different institutions at the end of the day. So it kind of there isn't that much of a rivalry as you would expect.
If students opt to live off campus, is it possible that Northumbria and Newcastle students will live together?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, I had situations where I would go to, for example, house parties in blocks of flats, and people would be there from all sorts of like different programs from both institutions. So it's quite nice again because you end up meeting a lot more people who are obviously in the same situation as you as a university student, but then from a very varied kind of academic background. So it makes for a nice mixture that way as well.
Are your school sports rivals?
Technically, yes. Yeah. So that's maybe the main rivalry that we have. But in the UK, we have something called Bucks, which is the British Universities and Colleges Sports kind of competition, um, kind of yeah, like system. And so we have kind of quite often do play against Newcastle, but it doesn't get too ugly, I would say.
So it's not like, say, Ohio State and Michigan would be here in the United States.
Yeah, no, it doesn't get quite as intense as I know university sports does in the US, that's for sure.
For this is my last question. For if it's an American student settling into Newcastle, whether they live on or off campus at the
Hmm.
at the beginning, what are some fun things that they should do in their first few months at school?
I mean, to be honest, like you alluded to earlier, I've lived here a long time. So I came to university in 2009, which I guess is coming up on 15 years soon, and I'm still here. And I think the beauty of Newcastle is that it's kind of ever evolving and ever changing. And because we've got these two large universities in the city centre, so it's very student friendly. And so my top tip to students is always just to get out there and just kind of, try and experience everything that you can. We've got really good events on campus. We've got shared events with Newcastle. We've got, kind of other events going on in the city that are just meant for students from both institutions. And there's just so much to do in terms of social life. We've got really good live music scenes. There's arts, exhibits, things like that. So I don't think you can get bored in Newcastle, to be perfectly honest. And I think that's obviously students, they're coming here to study. We want to make sure that you're focusing on your academics and you're not going to be just, kind of partying your night away. But at the same time, it's important to have that kind of work life balance and have a good social life and meet people. And for that, Newcastle is absolutely fantastic because there's just always something happening. And it's usually budget friendly because it's a student city and very international, very welcoming, and just, yeah, a lot of fun.
That's a good ending to this. Sophie, thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for spending this time with me.